Hello. Welcome back to another episode of When We Cry Smoking Room. I would love to pretend that it was a long time since I last recorded. However, I would first like to introduce my other co-hosts.
Hello, it's Lurf. There has been at least an hour since we last recorded. Probably maybe more. Definitely more. It has not been only an hour since we last picked up this.
Yes, of course. So I am your friendly neighborhood mushroom, and if you heard our last episode, hopefully we will be putting this in a timely fashion. We are going to welcome back our guests. Say hello to everybody.
Eons have passed since last we spoke. On some level, physical, emotional, metaphysical, psychological, we are all different people since that last recording.
Yes.
Hi, I'm
sure.
Jelly.
I've been through so much.
Yay! Hello, Jelly.
Welcome back to the podcast, Jelly. Excited for part 2 of your Umineko journey.
If you
thoughts.
thought that last episode was deranged, you're definitely in your right mind.
Yeah, turn off now to not get more mind poisoning or, absolutely get your brain infected. So, as usual, this will be up to EP4 spoilers. We will be talking about actually lots of theories. And I will surely deeply regret whatever horrible closing thoughts I had on my other episode because it's going to be a nightmare to edit. But I'm excited to have Jelly to now talk about all the actual mystery theories and what's happening on this island. So yes, Jelly, please blow our minds out of the water or something.
Okay, so I think Shannon, Cannon, and Beatrice are all the same person.
Okay. Why would you say that?
What brought you to that conclusion?
I'll be honest. It's been so long since I formulated this original idea that I don't remember what exactly made me start to believe that Shannon and Cannon were the same person. If I had to guess, I think it had something to do with they never seem to share screen time is the thing that I started to notice, or at least what made me
do you mean by share
begin to
screen
notice it.
time? As in, like, do they have a lot of conversations with each other?
Okay, well let me rewind because there's one other qualifier that needs to be stated before I can get to this.
Okay, cool.
I think that if Battler is not present in the scene in some capacity, the information currently being witnessed is unreliable. To some degree.
Okay.
That's not to say that if Battler isn't there, it didn't happen at all, right? I'm not saying that Battler not in scene equals scene non-existent, and all of it is entirely fabrication. Just that what exactly happened there is more dubious, right?
Okay. All right.
And this has some qualifiers or some things to perhaps lend it more credence, the biggest of which that I can think, or the biggest counter-argument that someone might say, is the end of episode 2, where there's all that magic bullshit happening, obviously, where Battler gets chained up and taken downstairs, and the goats devour him.
Yeah, he's having his puppy play moments. He's having
yes, that whole thing. Where someone might say, okay, well, Battler was present for all of that, so obviously wouldn't that mean that that's all completely reliable? And to that I raise, he's drunk during that scene. It's clearly established that before that scene, before he wanders up to Kinzo's room, he's sitting down in the parlor just downing an entire bottle of alcohol by himself. And he's an 18-year-old kid who has, I believe, just been subsisting either on nothing or canned rations, right? He hasn't been eating. And he's also 18 years old, not a very heavy build, right?
Yes. And also
very clearly drunk.
Clearly drunk, and also, not for 2 hours ago got a gun pointed at him by his own aunt.
And never had alcohol before, yeah.
He's very clearly not a reliable source himself there, right? So that's my qualifying statement, is that if Battler isn't there, the information is less reliable. Not unreliable entirely, but less reliable. Okay?
Okay.
And so when I say...
I have another counter to this, real quick. End of episode 4, the balcony scene of Battler looking up and seeing Beato on the game board, right up there in front of him.
Now, Why are you submitting that as a counter?
Just like, I mean, like, that's a whole witch right there in front of him.
I don't think that's necessarily true, because she doesn't do anything magical during that scene.
But that is a
Her
whole
presence
new
is
women.
entirely physical. It is perhaps a whole new person, in the sense that Battler hasn't physically seen anyone who looks like Beatrice, other than, of course, the person in the portrait. But that's not to say that the Beatrice he sees there is the Beatrice from the portrait. It could very easily be someone dressed as Beatrice, or at least that would be my easiest comparison to make, is someone who is dressed as Beatrice and is performing as Beatrice, I would have to say.
Right.
And in this case, because of my overarching theory, that person would also be the same person as Shannon and Canon. So whoever it is, I would say, is clearly no stranger to wearing disguises or costumes to act as another person or appear as another person. And in this case, there's a very clear visual stand-in that they have to base their appearance off of, with the Beatrice in the portrait.
Why do you think it's Shannon and Canon in particular? Why isn't it just one of them? But
Okay, so originally I thought it was just Shannon and Canon are the same person. And my reasoning for that, I'm remembering now. Okay, so one, they don't share a lot of screen time, or if I'm remembering correctly, any screen time with each other when Battler is in the scene. I don't think that there is any scene where Battler is there and Shannon and Canon are both present and talking. Right? I don't think that happens in all of episode 1 through 4. But the thing that made me realize, or rather, the biggest piece of evidence I have for connecting how it is specifically Shannon and Canon, is the closed room chain in episode 3, where there's a dead servant in one room with a key. That key leads to the next room that is locked. In that room is a dead servant with a key, leads to the next room, leads to the next room, leads to the next room, implying that the only way to get from one room to the next is to get the key that is on that servant's body, right? And my thinking was, this chain is very time-consuming. It's designed in such a way to lead the entire group of people, or whoever is following it, from one location to the next, to the next, to the next, in a very specific sequential order. And at the beginning of that sequence is Shannon, and at the end of that sequence, outside of the manor, in the point furthest from every other room in the chain, in the chapel, is Canon. Which is to say that if Shannon was not actually dead there, and was pretending to be dead, and is also Canon, once they get the key from her body and move to the next room, she would have plenty of time to get all the way to the chapel to set up Canon's body for them to find.
I have a question about that.
Hit me.
Okay, so why can't it just be Canon who has done all the murder, and that Canon is the last person that is alive pretending to be dead in the last room? Like, why would it need to be that Shannon and Canon are the same person? That's not very necessary for the solving of that murder. Is it?
I don't think it is necessary, no. Not necessarily for, if we're talking just specifically the sequence of events, it's entirely possible that Canon is just the last person in the chain, and so he set it up so he's the last person in the chain. That's all that matters. So, if we're talking from that angle, I guess I don't have any specific proof that I can point to say this is why it has to be Shannon and Canon, other than the immediate gut reaction hunch of this chain of events is set up in such a way to provide time for one person to do something in another location while this chain is being followed.
So this is for you a more gut reaction instead of something that you feel more that you have contextual evidence base, or do you feel like you have more other...
I'd say that alongside the Shannon and Canon not appearing together in the same room as Battler, those two pieces of information to me connect in such a way that it's hard for me to disentangle them, if that makes sense. It's hard for me to take those two pieces of information and not synthesize that Shannon and Canon must be the same person. Rather, the other thing that's also factoring into that is the very clear, and this is another gut reaction, the very clear, to me, implication that there are way less than 18 people on the island, right?
Why do you think that there's way less than 18 people on
Because every time the number of people established on the island, or every time the number of people on the island is established, it is always, there are no more than this number. Which naturally implies there could be less. It's not there are 18 people, it's there are no more than 18 people. And already, that number has been reduced by 1 with the reveal that Kinzo is dead. And so now it's there are no more than 17 people. And if we can remove 1 from the board, it's very plausible to believe, with the same phrasing, we can remove even more from the board. Right?
Okay.
And so...
How many people do you think are on this island?
How many people do I think are on this island? Okay, so here's my thinking. Currently, I think there are... Well, I'm bad at math, so give me a second here. It's either 15 or 16 people. Because I think it would be 16, because if we're eliminating Canon or Shannon, we're eliminating one of them, condensing them into one person, and Beatrice isn't among those initially considered 17 now. I think it would be 16 people on the island.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But there's the possibility for less. I'm not sure entirely, because there's...
How would there be less than you think? Like, where else would you reduce people?
Well, originally, when I just thought it was Shannon and Cannon, some people suggested that it was also Beatrice, and I thought that was... I was thinking it would be a little too much if all of the people that were committing stuff were just all one person represented as so many different people. But in much the same way that I'm willing to entertain if Kinzo is fake, let more people could also not be factored into that 18. If I'm willing to admit that Shannon and Cannon could also include Beatrice as a third person in that singular person, it's possible that maybe some of the other servants of the Ushiromiya family could be part of that as well. Even though I don't fully believe that to be the case.
Okay. So you have like your thoughts of like Shannon and Cannon being the same person, but why do you think they're also Beatrice? Like, why do you think it's like there's that specific connection there?
Primarily, it has to do with my conversations with some of the other people in the community regarding Battler's Sin.
Okay.
So whenever Battler's Sin was first brought up in episode 4, if you've watched the stream, my gut reaction was to follow a Sins of the Father type of thinking.
Yes,
which is to say that I know that Kinzo, if you're reading into the subtext of everything to do with Beatrice, has committed unbelievable atrocities against whoever Beatrice is, and that could be multiple people.
Do you want to elaborate on your thoughts about what you think Kinzo has committed?
Kinzo...
That's a whole nother theory that you are right now presenting.
Yeah. So Kinzo, bare minimum, has groomed two different children, I would say, to be Beatrice. He had a mistress named Beatrice, or who was under this identity as Beatrice, who was not on the island willingly, and in order to escape that imprisonment, killed herself. And Kinzo has attempted to, quote-unquote, resurrect her at least twice. One was the Beatrice that Rosa met, and who died by falling off the cliff. And the second is the Beatrice that is currently an active element in the murders in the present day, or rather in the game board.
So where do you think you got the idea that the first Beatrice died of a suicide, I guess?
I don't remember the specific wording, but there was a lot of talk of she was chained there. She was trapped there on the island, and the only way that she could escape was to leave her physical form behind. Which reads to me as a very blatant metaphor for suicide.
Yeah, that is what Battler said, though Beato was very insistent that it wasn't suicide, she was leaving her physical form behind.
Now that you're saying that, it is making me wonder, because there is a distinction in episode 4 drawn between Beatrice, the magical witch meta-entity, and Beatrice, the physical game board entity, specifically in one wearing the very ornate dress and one wearing the more modern outfit that has
the short skirt dress.
Yeah, the short skirt. So
Programmer
maybe rather than a physical death via suicide of that Beatrice, maybe that was an escape via magic into that separate persona of this witch Beatrice and continuing to persist as this physical
When you
Beatrice.
say an escape with magic, what do you mean by that?
I specifically mean the manifestation of an alternate witch persona.
Okay.
Okay.
Like we've seen with Eva Beatrice, like we've seen with Maria Beatrice, maybe even like we've seen with Angie Beatrice.
Okay. I want to hear more about your thoughts about all these other theories, but I first wanted to ask, like, what do you think this name Beatrice means to you? Like, or means to people in the story?
This is something that I was actually talking with a friend, Jeremiah. I think we mentioned him back in episode 1. Who is going at this with a much more like religious Christian text analysis angle. I asked him the other day if there was any connection between the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and Beatrice existing as Beatrice, Canon, and Shannon, because, you know, obviously there's 3. Are there any parallels just between the numbers there, right?
Yeah.
And he said, let me see if I can find it. Because this is actually very relevant. So, generally speaking, he didn't think that there was any specific connection. He said if there is any connection between Beatrice and the Holy Trinity, it may be more easy to find in something like Beatrice, as in Beato, Ava Beatrice, and Angie Beatrice, but he couldn't find any specific connection between those 3 entities. And obviously, if we're including Maria Beatrice, that becomes 4 entities, so it doesn't line up entirely with the Holy Trinity.
Okay.
I'm just going to read some of his analysis outright, if that's all right, because it'll help me form
Of course,
the
go
ideas.
for it.
So he said, regarding the Holy Trinity, there isn't much given to us to connect any of Beatrice's quote-unquote parts to any of the Trinity per se, but the concept of Beatrice, as we've seen, aligns well with the Divine Comedy in setting up the idea of a divine being. In the comedy, not only does Beatrice, in this sense, Beatrice within the Divine Comedy, not the Umineko Beatrice, represent divine revelation, theology, and faith, but she also takes on a Christ-like role. This is a pretty explicit association from some of Dante's earlier works, and one can easily see the obvious comparison between Christ coming back to judge humanity with Beatrice returning to judge Dante, which, this is me inserting, itself has parallels between the scene of Battler being judged by Beatrice up on the balcony in episode 4, which is a big part of what ties into this analysis. And yet, with all that said, she very much retains her own identity. This is back to talking about Beatrice and Dante's Inferno. One of her first lines in Purgatorio is, "Look, I am Beatrice," consistent with one of the book's broader themes of penitent souls assimilating themselves to Christ while also maintaining their own sense of self. That is, quote, the true path to redemption. We definitely see this a bit in Umineko in some of the conversations between Beatrice and Battler. She's very much judging him and putting him through tests, i.e. games, in which she always seemingly has the upper hand. She's not exactly divine, but she's clearly a magical authority and is there to guide Battler through the story, to repent for his own sins. Because of her role in purifying his sins, some have also associated Beatrice in the Divine Comedy as acting as the Holy Spirit. So there's one form of the Trinity there for you. Again, though, it's not entirely clear for me how that model fits onto Umineko. Okay. There's a lot going on there, but the part that I specifically want to hone in on is this idea of Beatrice being this aspect, a Christ-like entity, and that you need to take some portion of Christ into yourself while still maintaining your own identity to seek true redemption. And in that sense, I think the title of Beatrice is that same aspect of Christ that you must embody while still maintaining your own sense of self. And that's why it's Angie Beatrice, Ava Beatrice, Maria Beatrice. And if we're looking at it from that lens, the crisis with Beatrice Beato becomes all the more potent because we don't know who she is other than Beatrice. She even asks Battler at the end of episode 4, "Who am I?" She lacks an identity outside of that aspect of Christ. She is not something Beatrice, she is just Beatrice. But we know she's not Beatrice, because it's a title. So, who is she? And my answer to that, who is she, is multiple different people that we have seen throughout the story.
All right.
That's a lot. I apologize.
No, that was
No,
beautiful.
This is incredible.
Like, this is the whole reason I took Dante's Inferno class in college.
No, I was gonna say this something really important. I'm not sure if I should keep this on this podcast, keep it on a podcast, but you have just said something that I actually never thought about.
Oh.
Like, I'm not, like, that is, which is a really, really shocking thing to say. I've thought a lot of thoughts about Umineko. Lurf have heard me talk about theories that nobody else we've seen on Tumblr.
Oh yeah,
ever talked
I have
about
an episode
Umineko.
2 theory that I think I'm the only person who's ever posted about it anywhere or said anything about it.
Interesting.
But no, what you just said was incredible.
It was beautiful.
Have never thought about the idea that Beatrice lacks the identity besides Beatrice, even though in textually, in text that is very supported, but not in the way that she compares to other people's names. That is fascinating, and I felt like I learned so much just now.
No, see, that is why I love this podcast.
You see, the cool part about that, and why I love literary analysis so much, and specifically discussing literary analysis so much, is that I made that shit up right now.
Yeah. That's what I love about it.
I made that up incredible. While I was reading this, and I was like, you know what? That makes perfect sense.
You convinced me. I'm convinced.
Yeah, I've been
sold
convinced.
Me on that.
Like the whole she does not have the name before to add to her Beatrice title is so.
Here's the thing: when I say delicious. I'm making that up right now, I'm not saying like, oh, I fabricated it. I'm saying I synthesized it.
Yes.
Right now, I'm saying that
I understand.
Until the moment when I was reading that text and explaining my thoughts on it, I did not have that theory. It crystallized as it was coming out of my mouth. Which is why I love this format so much.
Jelly, today will be the day. If today is going to be a day where you crack open more things of Umineko right now, right here, I will be happy to be here just to facilitate, just to see it happen. That was incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now I just need to find a way to write that and message Jeremiah back about it, because it's been hold on one second. Let me just go through my DMs. Yeah, he sent that to me 5 days ago. This is just a quick check if you're listening to this podcast and you're waiting, or you forgot to respond to a message and you've been meaning to respond to that message. Go send that DM. Please. Don't forget about it again. Right, please. Don't forget about it. Send it now. Before you forget again. Send it now.
Oh, God. So now my question is this for you. What do you think Beatrice wants?
Agency.
Why do you say agency?
Elaborate.
So let's look at her 3 potential personalities here. We have the witch, Beato. I'll call them Beato, Shannon, and Ken. We have the witch, Beato, who is either... let's look at the possible angles. Either she is Kinzo's prisoner, who is forced to play the role of Beato and is very clearly implied to be sexually abused by him, among other various abuses. Why would you
claim that?
I claim that because the conversation with, quote-unquote, drunk Beatrice in the scene has a lot of, hints at her being tied to a bed and, Kinzo having his way with her.
Scene, or
the EP4 scene.
Okay,
the
EP4 scene, drunk Beatrice calls Battler on phone. That scene.
No, whenever she's talking to him on the balcony. There's mentions of her being chained to a bed and rough treatment from Kinzo, which to me implies some form of potential sexual abuse.
Okay.
And that just in general alongside any other potential abuses that may be suffered by her through Kinzo with all of the bad things that have been implied about him. It's very clear that the game board Beatrice is not someone who has a lot of agency. Right? Mm-hmm. If we look at Meta Beatrice, in the end of episode 4 currently, she is begging Battler since the very beginning of episode, or rather since the first interaction she has with Battler in the first tea party, to acknowledge her. Not just as a witch, to just acknowledge her. Not that magic is real, to acknowledge her, that she is real. Right? That is the number one thing she wants, is to be acknowledged as a person. And we talked in episode 1 that whether it's through some miscommunication or whether they do understand each other and the circumstances don't allow a resolution to that, that is exactly what Battler is doing. He does recognize her as a person. He does see her, or at the very least, he wants to see her and understand her as a person and is not willing to give up on her until he does. Right? That's what I think their entire back and forth at the end of episode 4 is about, is his commitment to seeing her and promising her that he will. Right? So in that sense, she's maybe the most, Meta Beato is perhaps the most fulfilled or likely to have her desires fulfilled of the many facets of Beatrice.
As in that version of Beatrice would have the most amount of agency?
Yes, or at least is the closest to attaining some form of true agency.
Okay. And when you say agency, you mean like being able to have like control over situations and
control of her surroundings, control of how other people perceive her, and maybe just like the ability to be perceived as an autonomous human being.
Okay.
Right.
Who has their own like wants, needs, desire, just to be seen as a person, essentially. Because one of the things that we see so much in episode 1, especially, is even, like, the Epitaph has a part about the Golden Witch being acknowledged, right? Like, they'll praise my name, right? There's some form of acknowledgement of Beatrice inherent to the Epitaph. But in episode 1, everyone outside of Battler, who is actively contesting her existence and is fighting her and is forcing her to prove herself, everyone either views her as a source of power, something to be gained, something that will save them from their circumstances, or something that will take from them, some malevolent force which has come into their lives to uproot them and that needs to be overcome. In both cases, good and bad, black magic or white magic, she is a tool or an obstacle. She is not a person, she is a concept that needs to be utilized or overcome. But when Battler engages with her, she is a person that he needs to understand and argue with. She is his opponent, she's not an obstacle. There's a very important distinction to be made between those two words.
Okay.
In terms of agency, real quick, I'll cover Shannon and Canon because they're a lot easier to focus on. I think them having a lack of agency is a lot more obvious in the sense that they are servants of the Ushiromiya family, which we already know the Ushiromiya family is pretty bad business given the regular themes of the text, and, you know, the patriarchal negative overtones and all that jazz. And also, they're forced to refer to themselves as furniture. Like, it doesn't get more dehumanizing than that.
Yeah.
To be a servant of a family that regards all of its servants as furniture, as not even human beings. In a situation like that, you definitely want someone to treat you like a human being.
Okay. So my first question for you would be, like, why, if what Beatrice wants, or what Beato wants, is acknowledgement as a human, why does she go out of her way to claim that she's a witch? And not only that, she wants to be seen as a witch.
I think, if I had to guess, it is some form of coping mechanism.
Okay.
With the reality of her situation. I may have mentioned this in episode 1, but my general theory with witches is that they are supremely or like extremely traumatized women. Specifically, in this case, it seems to be women who have been traumatized by the Ushiromiya family, or, you know, by consequences of being in relation to the Ushiromiya family, who have had to escape their trauma through some form of depersonalization and an unhealthy engagement with magic.
Okay.
And if that is the case, I think that Witch Beatrice and her insistence upon being a witch and being someone who can perform magic, that is like an attempt to force agency upon herself. if that makes sense.
Okay.
It is an attempt to forcibly imbue herself with a level of agency and control which she cannot actually have in her physical surroundings. It is like almost a mantra of existence.
That's a fascinating way to put it.
In much the same way that Battler has to insist time and time again that magic isn't real because a real world affirms his existence and his agency and his control, Beatrice has to affirm and insist that magic is real and that she is a witch because it is such a defining part of who she believes herself to be.
Okay.
They're foils of each other in that sense.
Well, so you know how you talked about in the first episode that you said you weren't really sure where, the story of Umineko will be going, like what will be the latter chapters to be. So in the scenario, what you just set up, since they're perfect foils of each other, what do you think should happen? Or, I don't know, like in the scenario where you're thinking, like, what would be the logical conclusion to the story then?
Yeah.
I might have already said this. The logical conclusion to me is that I, the reader, must decide where I stand regarding magic and reality. I don't think personally I will be satisfied if the conclusion is clear-cut. I will not be satisfied if the VN simply states magic is real, magic is not real. Because I wholeheartedly believe the truth lies somewhere between those 2 points.
Okay.
Okay. Do you think these two characters would ever be able to reach an agreement?
That is a tough one.
Oh, man.
I can hear the cogs turning.
No,
No.
I don't think they would. I don't think that Meta Battler and Meta Beatrice would ever be able to reach an agreement without completely becoming different people.
Interesting.
Like, their entire existences are based on an understanding of the world that is completely antithetical to one another.
Like incongruent.
Yeah, they are polar opposites, and not in a way that, like, you could convince them of a new point of view. Like, their entire existence is substantiated on a belief in a certain way of viewing the world. Which is to say that if the other was ever convinced of the other point of view, they would essentially cease to exist on a fundamental level.
Well, in your first episode, you talked about how you think that Umineko is a work of fundamentally about love and understanding. And
yes,
I guess, like, you've decided to assign an incredibly, I guess, cruel fate to the both of them. I guess I will just ask you a second, more easier question. Do you think Balor and Beatrice should kiss?
I mean, obviously, yeah. No.
Okay.
I mean, it goes without saying. Yeah. It's like the strongest I've ever felt for a straight ship in my entire life.
I honestly, like, there's something about Beato and Battler where, like, it is a straight ship. Do not get me wrong. That is a woman and a man. However, there's something very queer-coded about it that you cannot explain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it goes without saying that they should kiss. It's a bygone conclusion at this point in the text. That said, that kind of influences my conclusion in that I think, yes, Umineko is a love story. Yes, I think Umineko is an optimistic text. Yes, I think there will be a positive conclusion, but I do not think that conclusion is for the Battler and Beatrice that we have come to know throughout the story. I think
really interesting.
I think that a lot of the characters in Umineko exist in a sense of, like, pure empathetic tragedy. If that makes sense. Like, Rosa is the best example of this. You can hate her as much as you want for what she does to Maria. You can have as much pity as you want for what has happened to her. But at the end of the day, you know in your heart, or at least I know in my heart, that there is nothing that could be done for her short of completely upending every single system that created her.
Interesting.
She could not, under any circumstances, avoid her fate. And that is neither condemnation nor an excuse for her behavior. It is just a fact of the world. I think that in much the same way that the viewer or the reader must come to some conclusion that finds a midpoint between reality and magic that Beatrice and Battler could never, or Meta Battler and Meta Beatrice could not possibly reach. I think that is the point. You are supposed to realize that tragedy of these two cannot reach that conclusion, but you can.
You, the reader.
You, the reader, can find love in the world and choose to follow it.
That's really poignant and beautiful. Very sweet. I was going to say my thoughts about Rosa that you just mentioned is that I always note upon my reread of Umineko that I think Rosa is a very fascinating character because she's one of those only characters I have ever read that has basically her horror, like you think that she has like a normal arc that a normal person would read. You read all of EP2 and you're like, this is the part that she gets bad. And then she has her redemption in the very end. And you're like, wow, that's a good, like, Rosa arc. I really, like, learned a lot about Rosa. Like, that was really well developed. And I now feel really bad for her. And then just for the Yukishi to, like, throw you a turn and then be like, oh, welcome back. It's EP4 now. Would you like to hate Rosa even more than you already did? Welcome back. And in EP4, she doesn't have a redemption. She ends her character being the worst version of herself that she can possibly be. And that is the last point you see of her.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that once again, Ryukishi is a master at playing with tropes in the sense of, like, playing with toys in a toy box, where it's almost playing with the idea of a redemption arc in general. You can't put a neat bow on this character by just saying, like, oh, when push comes to shove, she would do anything for Maria. Because, no, she wouldn't. She wouldn't. She might, but she probably wouldn't.
Your every life and death moment is not a push come to shove moment.
Like, she won't even fucking, like, leave her, like, fling of a boyfriend to go spend time with her daughter when she's home alone and sad.
Even in that life or death scenario, she can't bring herself to drop the gold and grab Maria's hand.
Right? Like,
that's Rosa at her best.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I do have a question before we get
absolutely
way far off. This is relating a little bit to the past thing you brought up at the very start here, in which you have this idea Shannon and Canon are the same person, but I did want to ask, obviously, like, you have, like, the why you think that, but I want to ask, why do you think in, like, what justification do they have for this?
This is the part...
Like, why would they do this?
This is the part that I don't know. I don't know anything about it. The only way that I could possibly, like, rationalize this in my mind is that Jessica is stupid.
Okay.
Because she knows Shannon and Canon personally. So unless there's way more lying to the viewer taking place, and Shannon and Canon are just one person, and everyone in the story knows they're one person, and they treat them as one person, and they talk to them as one person, and we, the reader, are the only people that see them as two different people.
Though Battler does acknowledge Canon as a separate existence.
Yeah, unless, like, that's a lie, Jessica is living in the Ushiromiya family mansion with a rotating cast of servants, yes, but a rotating cast that includes Shannon and Canon, and she has a personal relationship with both of them, and wouldn't be able to come to the conclusion that they're the same person. Now, granted, I'm willing to give her some leeway. One, she's a teenage girl.
Okay.
She's under a lot of mental and social pressure just by being next in line for the Ushiromiya family.
Okay.
And she herself is living a double life as Jessica and Jessie.
I have a question for you. So, Jelly, have you met twins in your real life?
I have, yes.
Okay.
I think I might know where this is leading, and okay, I'll let you continue.
Okay,
I'll let you continue.
I'll do my fake spiel first, and then you can then debate me on this. I am an idiot. I like for the longest part of my life, I didn't meet that many twins, and then when I moved to a new school, I met these two girls who I guess they were twins, of course, and I had different classes with them in different, like, it was in high school. I had different classes with either of them, and that I just thought they were the same person, and that I would just keep addressing them like they were the same person until a day they both showed up, and then I realized they were twins and they were not the same person, and that I was like talking to them thinking that I was talking about the same thing. And this happened like multiple times in my life, where this time it was a situation this is not twins, they are siblings. One of them is the older brother of 2 years older, and then one of them is younger. This is when I was in college. I was the college vice president of this club, and both of them came to talk to me at certain points. And I kept thinking that this violinist was like a percussion player, because I was like, I don't know, he just gave me a percussion player vibe. Only until during Halloween, where the brother dressed up as his older brother and wore a shirt that it was his, and then it had a name tag that says, "My name is blank," which is the other brother's name. I realized they weren't the same person. Okay. So
you're intimately familiar with the reverse of this switcheroo,
yes,
so to speak.
So my point was more like, and then I will tell you a third story. I am not done. This
Another one.
I hope if you could gain any knowledge from my stories is that I am really bad with faces. Is that there was this girl I used to know also in college who told me that they had a sister in the same college, that I would also run into the sister. And then later on I found out that the sister and this girl I knew were the same person. And it wasn't like there wasn't actually a sister. And I was like, oh my God, you could totally just tell me anything and I would just believe you. And I was like, how did all three of these... I'm not saying that Jessica's stupid, because maybe she is, because I'm not advocating that she's not dumb, because in this scenario, I'm dumb. But I'm saying, all three of these stories are real stories and they all happened to me.
I was just going to say, to give her some plausible deniability here, and this is assuming that, this is just without considering other angles.
Okay.
If I knew two people who looked similar, but were completely different in terms of personality and appearance, they just look similar.
Yes.
And you just told me and I never saw them in the same place at the same time. Okay? Mm-hmm. If you told me those two people are the same person, that's the most insane thing you could ever say to me. I think. If you were to try and convince me that two people were the same person just because I had never seen them in the same place at the same time, I would think you were crazy.
We're having object permanent issues right now.
A batshit thing to say. Yes.
I'm not a dog or a 2-year-old. I understand what object permanent is. When somebody leaves my vision, they probably still exist, right?
Now, granted, this is also factoring in, they would have to do different voices and all the other physical differences that we can't really observe just reading a VN, but there's plenty of room for plausible deniability in the idea that Jessica would not know they were the same person. Right?
Okay.
It also, factoring into that is also the fact that she is very clearly friends with Shannon. Mm-hmm. And has more of a teenage crush on Cannon. Mm-hmm. Which may lend to the idea that she didn't interact with him all that much, or their interactions were very scattered and awkward, so maybe she couldn't get a beat on him, right? So there's plausible deniability in the idea that Jessica wouldn't know. But then I'd also have to wonder, like, does Kraus know?
Does Kraus know?
Does Natsuhi know?
Does Natsuhi know?
I
have no idea.
I will say one thing, in which Mushroom, I am your exact opposite. And I have textual proof of this, but my facepline is really bad. And the other day, my friends were not believing me, and they kept sending me pictures of actors, and they would send me pictures of the same fucking person, but like in 2 different shows, and I would not be able to tell they were the same person. Like, just for an example, like, I'm sending some messages in right now, but I got sent, and I still don't think they're the same person. I know they are, like, objectively. However, you can't tell me these are the same person. Which I guess brings credit to Jessica, because if your theory here is the case, Joey, I am the Jessica, and I am incredibly stupid, and I would not be able to tell the same person apart if they changed their hair.
Gotcha. So I guess the point that we're arriving at here is that, as a complete inverse to George Ushiromiya, Jessica Ushiromiya has never done anything wrong.
Yeah.
She's just a girl.
She's just a girl.
Just a girl. You're so good. She's just a girl.
She's just a girl.
She's just a girl. Well,
Poor Jessica.
I was going to say, like, what is your opinions about all of you already stated very grandiosely about your opinions about George, and your myriad of thoughts about Battler. Like, what's your thoughts about all the rest of the cast?
Real quick, you did not answer my question. On the...
Oh yeah, what did you say? I'm sorry.
Why are they doing this though? Like, for what purpose?
Like, for what purpose are Shannon and Canon the same person?
Yeah.
Like, why would they do this?
Besides Jessica being really stupid, of course.
besides Jessica being really stupid, yeah. And besides this being a way for me to weasel in more Sapphism implied into the text, of course. I think it has something to do with... Well, I don't know is the problem.
Okay.
Because, here's what I have to say. Okay. Anything to do with the perceived relationship between Jessica and Canon, I don't know how much of it is reliable because Battler isn't there.
Why?
Right?
What is the point of making that unreliable?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I'm convinced that this is the case, but I'm not clear on the specificity of how or why it is the case.
Okay, but
like,
Jessica is overtly upset about Canon's injury or death.
Yeah,
like
let me backpedal.
Those are
on
all
that
things
then.
that Battler could see. It's not like that's.
I'm gonna backpedal.
Okay,
because I was thinking just about the beginning of episode 2, but no, there's a lot of scenes that involve Battler where he's like teasing her about liking Canon and all that stuff, and she very clearly reacts in a way that says like she does have a crush on Canon.
Yeah.
That was sort of leading into this idea of like the differentiation between Shannon and Canon is more metaphorical in that they represent 2 different aspects of the same person. Mm-hmm. Rather than one person who's masquerading as both people. Or in the case of including Beatrice, 3 people.
So in your scenario that you're advocating, Jessica has a crush on Shannon, but a different aspect of Shannon.
Something like that, yes. Or it could be a case of like physically they do disguise as Canon or Shannon. I'm not sure which is the true identity. Let's call the actual person underneath the 3 aspects of Shannon, Canon, and Beatrice Sayu.
Okay.
Because that's what Shannon says her real name is.
All right.
Right?
Sayu,
and
yeah.
Because Sayo, right? Sayo. And it's for that reason that I generally treat Shannon as the like quote unquote like truest version of this person in my mind. Like, that's who I think of when I think of like who they actually are, is Shannon, even though that might not be the case. Because Shannon is the one who reveals to George that her name is Sayo. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yes.
So I don't actually know physically who that person actually is. It could be the case that none of those three people are physically who Sayo actually is. It could be the case that Shannon is who Sayo actually is, and then she dresses as Canon, as Beatrice. It could be the case that Canon is who Sayo really is, and then he dresses as Beatrice and Shannon.
Okay.
If we're talking about, like, the physical aspects of it, if I'm trying to just, like, snapshot judgment, make, like, shooting from the hip, make the most of it, I'm going to assume physically that Shannon is the real physical person, and then whenever she acts as Canon, she probably just binds her chest.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So, in your theory, boobs are real.
Sorry,
Boobs
I just
are
had like a
real.
flashback to Joe on the podcast, or he was like, "What are these boobs? Like, how would she hide them? Like in the most distress?"
Again, yeah, and that's another reason why I think that Battler almost groping Shannon might. It's a whole thing. It's a whole.
Okay,
comes
call
back to
back to
boobs.
episode 1. Okay, I'll call
It's a
back to
whole
episode
thing.
1. Jelly goes on this whole tangent about boobs.
That's a really that's an extremely distorted way of putting it.
It's what happened.
It was more about the groping than the boobs.
Does that make it better?
But yes, I did have that whole tangent about how that entire scene is perhaps one of the most meaningful scenes of the entire questions arc. Yes.
In this scenario, you think if Shannon, in your theory, is the main body, I guess that's the best way to put it, that she would bind her chest if she is Canon, supposedly. Is that what you're trying to claim? Like, I'm just trying to extrapolate. what you're trying
I'm
to
saying
say.
that yes, if she is acting as Canon, she would bind her chest. Are you asking why she would bind her chest?
I mean, if she's pretending to be a boy, I think that's just self-explanatory. Yeah. So from what I'm picking up, at least like from the focus on Jessica, are you like saying like Sayo does this to fulfill some sort of sapphic dream with Jessica? Is that?
Not necessarily, although like the feminist literature angle does factor into, obviously feminist literature does engage with some themes of sapphism, and also the idea of changing your gender in order to better assimilate to society in some way. And in that sense, perhaps Shannon having feelings for Jessica and only being able to explore those feelings in the form of canon in this performance of, like, as a male persona could tie into those themes pretty neatly.
Okay.
I have 2 questions
Yes.
for you. My first question would be this. How does Battler factor into all of this?
Battler factors into this because I think he also had a relationship of some kind with Shannon in the past. I think that ties into his sin.
Okay, so what is the sin?
I think, and we talked about this, I talked about this in a YouTube comment, the only YouTube comment I will ever reply to on an Umineko VOD, and also talked about it with Joe a bit in episode 4. I touched upon no longer believing that Battler's sin was like a sins of the father type deal, but I don't think I ever actually said what I think his sin was. And I think that his sin is, quote-unquote, abandoning Sayo. Or Shannon in this case. Because I don't remember if it's I think it's episode 3 before we get to the Twilights, or any of the investigations. There's a scene with George, Jessica, Battler, and Shannon on the beach. And they're all, like, sharing embarrassing memories, teasing each other about having crushes and stuff like that. And there's this idea floated, or at one point, I think Jessica teases Battler about, he used to have a crush on Shannon. And Shannon makes mention that Battler promised that he would come and rescue her, and that he'd return on a white horse. That's the specific thing that comes to mind. And there's a lot of different angles you could come at that from. But the biggest one that the people that I discussed it with seemed to come at it from was the white horse is a symbol of the end times. Like when the white horse arrives, that is Armageddon, right?
Okay.
Right.
And
yeah. Okay.
Like 4 horsemen of the apocalypse or something.
yeah, that sort of thing. I'm not as well read when it comes to my Christian textual connections. But Jeremiah and the other people I've been talking with have made that connection pretty fervently. Like the white horses appear as a very common symbol in literature and movies. It's like a very common symbol to signify the end times have arrived or are approaching. You also see it in something like if either of you have played Thousand Times Resist.
No, but...
It also features as a prominent symbol
Okay.
in that game as well, which I highly recommend you play if you haven't already.
Seal of approval.
It's like one of the well-known symbols as it relates to intertextuality and Christian text.
Oh, that's exciting.
And so Shannon saying that Battler said he would arrive on a white horse to save her tells us two things. One, it ties into the red truce that Beatrice gives Battler in the balcony scene, where he says that his return, like, set into motion everything. Mm-hmm. Or set all the murders into motion, right? And so it's like his fault in some sense, because his return is him arriving to save her on the white horse, quote unquote, signaling Armageddon and the end times. And then that also brings us with the more textual fact of Shannon and Battler had some kind of maybe flirty relationship whenever they were much younger, right? This would have been when Battler was 12, right? And I think that what happened is Battler promised her that he would come back and save her, right? And he saw her as a person, not as furniture, because he's younger, because he's not as corrupted by the ideals of the Ushiromiya family and doesn't treat the servants as furniture. He's just a kid. He's treating her as a person because that's all he knows, like, how to engage with people is as people, right? And so he tells her 6 years ago, I'll save you. And then everything that happens with Rudolph and his mom happens, and he leaves for 6 years. And that entire time, Shannon is just left with this idea of Battler will save me. Battler will save me. Battler will save me. And those 6 years pass, and that entire time, if I'm assuming that Battler and Beatrice and Canon are all the same person, or sorry, that Beatrice, Shannon, and Canon are all the same person, she's endured who knows what degree and what kind and how much abuse from the Ushiromiya family in that time, all the while believing that Battler would come to save her. And I think in all that time, it has just completely worn her down and leads to her planning the murders as they occur.
Okay.
And so Battler's sin is abandoning her, even if he doesn't know it.
Okay.
Okay. I was just gonna comment on the absurdity of Sayo's love life in this hypothetical.
Yeah, that's the part that has me thinking, like, she had a crush on Battler, and then Battler was gone, so now she's in a relationship with George, and then, like, maybe kind of not in a relationship with Jessica. Like
that's a
there's so
that's
much
a whole
going on.
of...
Like, she's living the most fucked up dating sim ever contrived.
Yeah. Okay. So now I have questions for you. More questions. So my first question is that so you've read Steins Gate.
I've watched Steins Gate.
Oh, you watched Steins Gate. You never read.
I did not read the VN. I watched Joe stream a bit of the VN, and I was like, wow. I've got the patience of a saint. I'm feeling very agnostic towards this particular visual novel.
So Steins Gate and is this in the same era of Umineko as a VN. These are all early or mid 2000. Umineko came out between 2007 to 2009. Am I crazy? I think 2010 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So,
are you going to bring up Ruka?
Well, I'm not going to bring up Ruka. That is not exactly what I'm going to bring up. But my point is more that you have expressed a lot, excuse me, sorry, you've expressed a lot of fate in Ryukishi, and you express a lot of fate in his writing of, I don't know, feminist themes, and, you know, writing of female characters, and maybe writing vaguely sapphic characters like Angie, which is just like, our interpretation is very sapphic.
And even if we're going so far as to include the idea that, like, canon is this willing performance of a male persona by Shannon, we're even getting into some potentially transgender themes as well.
Yeah, so you're claiming big thoughts right now, which is, are you not scared that you will be disappointed? Like, what if this work sucks?
No.
You're not scared?
No, I have full faith.
You know...
I don't think that I will be completely correct, but I believe that it will have a satisfying resolution.
Where do you think your fate comes from? Like, you know...
I think it comes from all the other times that Ryukishi has set up a thing and then done it well. I don't think... Here's what I'm going to say. If I am extending my faith, like, as little as possible, alright? If I'm really not throwing him that life ring, and I'm trying not to pull him back to shore, this metaphor is getting too convoluted. I have enough faith to believe that it will end well. I think worst case scenario, he will stumble.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So how bad do you think he's going to stumble?
Worst case scenario, it will not be handled properly, or will not be engaged with properly, but I don't think it will be in such a way that it is, like, treated as a negative thing, if that makes sense.
Interesting. And you're saying this because you have faith in his work, or you saying this because you now have gained a lot of love for him?
It's a mixture of both, I would say.
Okay.
I have faith that he is willing to engage with these sorts of themes, and I have enough faith to believe that he will at least try to see them through in a satisfying manner.
Well, I mean, if what you have claimed is true, then Umineko truly plays into the most mortifying, murder mystery tropes that could possibly be. So,
exactly, yeah, because then you're dealing with the idea of, like, the villainization of trans people as this idea of adopting an alternate persona to do crimes specifically or for some nefarious purpose.
Yeah. I mean, this is the very Silence of the Lamb, plot line. The Silence of the Lamb is the one I always think about in the top of my head.
And there's also something to be said of the idea of the very overtly sapphic themes going on, or undertones, shall we call them? That's the right word. Overtones, I would go so far as to say, with Angie, and this idea of, if we want to, like, break down her existence from a very, like, let's look at this big picture, she only really exists to drive Battler forward and is, like, essentially killed off for shock value to spur Battler to action. It's very, like, you're fridging your character.
You're burying the gaze.
You're putting her through trauma. And you're exactly burying your gaze. You have this giant stand up. It's, like, very, like, classical bury your gaze of, like, I'll see you in hell, like she says to Mammon.
Do you think you're ever gonna see Angie again?
I don't know.
In the story? Do you want to?
I don't think I want to. Yes, I really like Angie as a character, and I would be sad if she was gone, but not, like, disappointed or upset in the author if she was gone. I would be impressed if she never shows up again. That would be an incredibly, like, dedicated farewell to a character to do that to them, and to just have them linger in your memory like that.
So, but you're not very sure if she's ever going to show up again.
I don't know. For all I know, like, half the cast might not even appear. We could start the Answers arc, and it's just, like, Homestuck years in the future, but not many, and it's just an entirely different group of people. I fully expect us to zoom out at least one generation further in the Ushiromiya family.
Okay.
I don't know how that would be the case, but I'm expecting it.
Interesting.
Or bracing myself
Of
for,
course.
rather.
I would also want to inform this for the viewers at home who are listening. I would like you to know that I did save all of you from being able to hear another probably an hour rant about Homestuck and Umineko together. That episode could also still happen with Jelly, but it can't happen right here. But
Not
right now.
We got a
but
job
right
to do.
here,
Not right now.
I could hear Jelly having the inkling to be very excited of the conceptual idea to talk about them together. And I just wanted you to know that episode might be on the horizon. It might not be. Put it in your pocket, please.
It's a possibility.
I would need to reread all of Homestuck.
I would join you. I'm evil like that.
It's not impossible, but we'll call it as likely as me reading Higurashi.
All right. We have asked a lot of what do you think is going to happen? What do you expect would happen? Whatever. But I kind of want your like Umineko wish list. Like what would you really want to like see in the future? In the scatter arcs of Umineko.
Yeah, like if we were making
Like,
it,
Even
like,
if it's
we were
like
making it-
impossible,
Right.
like if you're
Yeah.
like I want to see Beato and Battler kiss in the scatter arcs, like that is also like on the table, like just like pure
Okay,
wish
you want to know
fulfillment.
what's fucked up
Yeah.
about me? I don't even know if I want to see them kiss.
Oh, okay.
I know they should. I don't know if I want them to.
Yeah, Umineko wish list.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm just on Mr. Bones' wild ride right now.
You know what? That's completely.
I'm
fair.
just sort of I'm going through the haunted house and I'm ready for whatever fucked up creature Ryukushi pulls out of the curtains next time.
Oh, that's so funny that you say that. I recently read Ryukishi's interview with Ryukishi and Zune, the person who made Toho, and he described Ryukishi in that interview describes the feeling of writing his stories as the feeling of leading people on a haunted house, and that he says he
There's no way.
I'm pulling up the evidence right now, but oh boy, watch me, Zune.
You can't do this to me. You can't do this to me. You can't do this to me out of the text.
I sure can.
You're not
I
allowed.
sure
to
can.
you.
You're not allowed to do this to me.
I sure can do this right now.
I'm supposed to be safe here.
No.
I'm supposed to be
You will
safe
never
here.
be safe from Rikishi.
will
You
never-
should have learned that with Saku Gasp.
Oh my.
Okay, wait. Watch me do this to you right now. Haunted. Okay, so please, here you go. I'll read this to you for you.
I don't even like
Here,
carrots
here.
that much. You can't do this to me.
Ryukishi says, I think there are many different ways to create a character, but that is exactly what I need to learn from Key and Leaf to create more unique ones. For me, a scenario is like a haunted house. When everyone is looking at some point in space and then something suddenly jumps out, they will be scared. I like that kind of calculation. In Higurashi, I was switching between fun and horror to rise and lower the mood. I could start with fun and finish with horror, or the other way around. Umineko is the same, with a peaceful scene followed by a cruel one. It's fun to make the player's mind swing left and right, isn't it? In my case, I start by surprising the staff members.
He's crazy. Every day
How?
Rikishi does this.
Why? You can't do this to me. It had to be a haunted house, didn't it? It had to be the exact metaphor.
And that is an interview that was
I can't keep finding the bars of the cage, people. You can't keep doing this to me.
and that's an
Like
interview
Sun
from
Wukong and
2013.
Rikishi's the Buddha threatening you to like jump out of his hand.
I'm so sorry for interrupting that, but I needed to tell you that because I knew you
was
would
very
wanted to know.
Okay. All right, I can incorporate this into my worldview. That's fine. I'm totally normal. I can stand up straight and sit up straight and give normal answers. I don't know that I have a wish list.
Okay.
To be honest with you, I have my theories, and I'm excited to see whether I'm right or wrong. But to me, theory crafting is an exercise in thought, not so much an exercise in problems and solutions.
Okay.
If
I
that makes
agree,
sense.
yeah.
I do not go into a theory looking to solve it. I go into a theory looking to connect the dots. Mm-hmm. And if the connections I make are wrong, that can be fun, because it recontextualizes information. And if the connections I make are right, that's also fun, because it means I can keep going.
Okay. Okay, you said Canon and Shannon are Beatrice. Do you think any more people are Beatrice?
I don't think so, but I'm not going to say it's impossible.
That's fair.
Because once upon a time, a friend was talking to me, and they said that Shannon and Canon were the same person. And I said, no, that's stupid, there's no way. And then when I thought Shannon and Canon were the same person, someone told me, also, Beatrice is Shannon and Canon. I said, no, that's stupid, there's no way. And now I currently believe that Shannon, Canon, and Beatrice are all the same person. So at this point, I have to assume that the, most common, or, least common denominator, my disbelief in the idea of multiple people being the same person, it's possible. I'm not going to say I believe it, or that I have any beliefs of who that might be, but I'm not going to say it's impossible, because I've been wrong twice before.
Okay, that's a good mindset to go through.
Yeah, as a similar question, just for fun, rather than do you think anyone else is Beatrice, do you think anyone else will become Beatrice? Like, do you think we'll have more like stuff like
we'll have another Beatrice?
Yeah. Do you think there's more? Or do you think Angie is the last one?
Okay, well, I talked about spoilers, and I already think that Erica is another witch. So there's the possibility of whoever the hell Erica is, she might be Erica Beatrice. Okay. Or she might just be another, Lambda Burn style character who's just there for me to be confused about as they do random bullshit all the time.
Oh, yes, we have to ask you about magic. Yeah. Don't worry, I didn't forget about that.
Well, now I'm really curious what the fuck you think Erica is.
I have no idea. As far as I know, she's just this smug creature that people like. I know nothing else about her.
Smug creature. Smug creature.
That is a descriptor.
And smug creature describes, half of the cast in Umineko.
This is true.
Smug creature.
That's every single witch could be described pretty accurately by calling them a smug creature. Maybe the only witch that doesn't describe is Maria.
Or no, Maria could be a smug creature.
I don't know, she can get pretty smug when she's explaining magic
No,
to
that's
people.
true, she's very smug in episode 1. So maybe Angie is the only one that's not a smug creature. Although she gets very cheeky towards the end of episode 4.
Yeah, she's a little cheeky. I wouldn't call her smug, though. I don't think she has the ego to be smug.
No, she's very, very despondent in that sense.
Fascinating.
But yeah, I've got no clue who the hell Erica is or what her deal is. I just know that people really like her. And the vibe I get from that is, they like her in the same way of, you love a stress ball.
Okay. Fascinating.
That's how I love most of my characters.
I feel like that says more about you than it says about the characters.
Yes. Well, I think it says a lot about the characters I love as well. But I think this is a decent segue into your thoughts about the magic side of things, thoughts about the witches, systems of magic, the meta world, anything you want.
What is happening?
Okay,
what is happening?
What is magic?
Okay, I think I don't know. That's the big picture. I can't think big picture. I'm incapable of it, all right? I don't know what magic is as an all-encompassing system, but I know that love, I believe, is just human connection. It's not romantic love, it's not lust, it's not paternal love, it's not the love between friends, platonic love. Love is just any level of human connection. It is the ability to see other people as people and to engage with them as people. I think maybe in that case, magic is the ability to share in the world as they see it. Which means that you need to love someone, you need to be able to connect and empathize with another human being and able to see, in order to see the world as they see it. And magic is just the ability to share that world and to perceive that world.
Okay.
Maybe. In that sense, this goes back to something I talked about in episode 1 with chessboard thinking, actually. I think it's very interesting that Battler's main tactic early on of countering like the ideas of magic is essentially just putting yourself in the other person's perspective. This idea of, in order to combat this logic, you need to embrace it or view it from its perspective in some way. Even his like most basic defense against magic is still rooted in this idea of empathy for the person on the other side. That's not exactly a specific point I was making there, to be honest. It's just something that came to mind.
I understood the vibes you were going for. And sometimes analyzing Umineko is just about saying things that feel right.
Yeah, finding these non sequiturs that sound really intellectual.
Yeah. But after grasping like what you think just magic is overall, let's point our our eyes towards Purgatorio in the meta world. What is all this?
See, I don't have a fucking clue, man. Here's what I'm gonna say. I have a theory that I don't believe in fervently, but it's kind of impossible to disprove. And that is the power of Beatrice, or a witch, is just to control the narrative.
Okay.
So you think this is a narrative story?
I think it's metafiction. It's metafiction very, very clearly. All right? It is fiction about fiction.
You're saying that this is metafiction in the most literal sense. This is metafiction.
In the most literal sense,
we
possibly.
talked about this, I think, we joked about this in the episode 1, where I asked you, I was like, do you think this is time loop? Do you think this is time travel? Do you think this is parallel universes? Like, what version of this?
And my answer to that was no. I think that every episode is a different interpretation of the events that took place on this island with incomplete information.
Right.
And I think that the resolution, the quote-unquote answer at the end of all of this will be your interpretation, your final say after you have what are assumed to be all of the facts from all of these different perspectives.
Then where do all these stories come from?
I think they come from different people.
People?
Okay.
I don't think all of the episodes are from the same person.
So who's writing all of these episodes in this?
Or who
sense?
are writing each of the episodes if they're all different people?
Yeah.
I think episode 1 and 2 are written by Sayo.
Okay.
Why?
I think episode 3 because
Please explain more.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think they're written by Sayo because in episode 4, Angie finds there's all that talk about the message in the bottles, and it's clearly framed as these two message in the bottles, these stories of what describes what happens on the events. That's episode 1, that's episode 2. I don't remember if there was anything that was specifically said to be episode 3 in there, but Angie checks the handwriting of the message in a bottle against the handwriting in Maria's journal and determines that Beatrice is the one who wrote those two stories in the bottle, right? Or at least that's her conclusion based on that information, which leads me to believe that possibly, like, those two stories are, like, maybe these plans or fantasies of how Sayo would escape from the mistreatment of the Ushiromiya family. And they were either discovered and sent out or willingly sent out at some point in order to sow confusion about this or something or other. I'm not sure why or how they come into reality, if we can even believe that the future that Angie experiences in episode 4 is reality. That's an entire thing. I feel this is the most insane I've ever felt in my entire life.
That's how Umineko will do.
Yeah, in my notes to Lurf just now, I said, I was going to ask you, don't you ever worry that sometimes you sound absolute crazy and you're going too deep with these connections?
Yeah, obviously, but that's fun. So don't worry about it.
So
That's fair.
anything sounds insane if you explain it all at once.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I 1000% get you as a haver of insane theories myself.
So yes, I wanted to ask. So you say you don't think. Okay, you have just claimed that you don't even think the 1998 world is real. Is that what you're saying?
No, if it's true. I don't think.
What do you think
know,
is written
is
down
the
and what do
problem.
you think is not written down?
Or
is it all
written down where?
Here's where I'm at right now. Let me take you through my sequence of events and then we'll go for it. I was thinking episode 1 and 2 written by Sayo.
Okay.
Episode 3 written by Angie, with the very end being like this very like self-insert fan fiction. I'm going to insert myself into this narrative in order to solve it, in order to find some sort of closure to escape the cruel reality that has been inflicted upon me by these events. Right? But with the end of episode 4 revealing that Angie dies in 1998? It says that she dies, and also the implication that Gretel was just an insertion from either Lambda or Burn. Created in order to spur Battler forward so that he wouldn't give up his game against Beatrice. That makes me wonder if Angie ever actually existed, or not ever actually existed. How can I phrase this? If the world, the reality, the future we see with Angie is just a hypothetical world, a hypothetical reality based on what if no one came back.
Wait, so Angie is a real person, right? Like you're not claiming Angie is
Angie is a real person. She does exist outside of the game board. She is Battler's younger sister. Kyrie is her mom. Rudolph is her dad. She is a real physical person who exists.
Okay.
But I don't know if the future we see with adult Angie following the events of episode 3, which seems to imply like a continuity between those, right?
Yeah. So
where Eva is the culprit and she's the only one who survives. I don't know if that reality is real, in that that's what happens. Like at the end of the day, all the mysteries are solved. That's what actually happened. Only Ava came back, and it leads to this tortured existence for Angie.
Oh, okay.
Or if that is a hypothetical in the sense of Byrne has constructed this reality to show Battler, if you don't come back, and Eva is the only one who does come back, and Angie is left alone, this is what her future would be.
Okay.
All right. So it's basically
I don't know
a
to
sequel
what degree
to episode 3 directly. Okay.
Yes. I don't know to what degree that reality is fabricated, because I know that Gretel is fabricated. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that means that the reality we see with Angie is fabricated or not.
But you think the things that Angie finds on her whole journey, those things are real?
See, that's why I'm getting so tied up in this, because if I'm going to discard the reality of what happens in 1998 with adult Angie, that means that I have to discard like so much of my foundational understanding of what these episodes are on a larger scale.
Well, I guess you could say that like you could say that her future isn't real, but the things that she learns are real.
That's possible.
But I'm saying that like you're doing right now, what you're claiming is doing a lot of picking and choosing.
Exactly.
Which is
like that's not lost on me.
You have to feel satisfied with that. Like do you actually feel satisfied with picking and choosing is my question.
Yeah, because I think that Umineko is picking and choosing.
Okay.
I think that. Let me put it this way. As far as the large scale, I don't think any one episode of Umineko will contain the whole truth of what happened on Rikkenjima.
So what's real in Umineko right now?
I think it is bits and pieces from all of the episodes.
Okay.
All right.
I don't think any one direct sequence of events of an entire episode is the entire truth. I think that parts of each episode comprise the reality of what happened.
Okay.
Like there's a scene in episode 1 or whatever, and that actually did happen. There's a scene in episode 2 that actually did happen. There's a scene in episode 3 that actually did happen. That sort of thing.
All right, and then I guess by that logic, by the end of Umineko, you will believe you'll have like a decent enough picture to understand like what probably could have maybe happened.
Exactly.
Okay. I think I understand what you're putting down here. Circling back around a little bit, then I know you mentioned like Byrne possibly like writing EP4 to like show Battler like, oh, this is what'll happen if Angie like if Angie's left alone. And
I never did establish why I think that the power of the witch or the power of witches is to control the narrative.
Yeah, that's what I was coming back around to.
Okay. In Red, Beatrice says that with her power, any kind of closed room can be created or destroyed. As far as I understand it, this is the only thing about the nature of her magic that has ever been stated in Red.
I'm trying to think.
I don't know, like, as far as, like, what the specifics of her abilities are.
Okay.
I think that's the only one that has ever been stated in Red.
I can't think of any off the top of my head that aren't. So yeah. Go right ahead with that. Go right ahead with that.
And assuming that is the case, it's not necessarily like I got it in one. It's deniable. Like how can I phrase this? I don't think it's the truth. I don't think it's actually what's going on, but I haven't technically encountered anything that refutes it. Mm-hmm. I believe that if her power is to create or destroy any closed room, you could very easily say that if a writer is describing or creating a scenario, say in a mystery novel, they can create or destroy a closed room. They have control of the narrative, therefore they can create or destroy anything within that narrative.
Okay. I have a question for that then. Do you think that would make it cheap for mystery writers? Like, I'm saying this from a perspective of saying, like, sure, like, if you're claiming witches can control narratives, that's just a thought process I can buy, but closed room mysteries have their own prestige. It is the kind of closed, like, it's the kind of mysteries that people think about when they think about the perfect kind of the perfect crime. And regardless if it's a narrator or not who have created quote unquote this closed room, the closed room should still be like in the scenario, regardless if they can create or destroy a closed room, the closed room should still be perfect, right? Like, you're not saying that, like, you couldn't just retcon a closed room into becoming not closed room anymore.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, like, she's just going to have full narrative, like, carte blanche, like, actually that was a closed room because this, and I changed this. I don't think that she's going to, like, retroactively take control of the narrative and change certain facts or anything like that. I'm more so saying that, like, as the writer, quote unquote, of this scenario, she is able to put forward those ideas into motion.
Interesting.
If that makes sense.
I think I can pick up what you're putting down.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like she can just say in the middle of the story, oh, and also this is a closed room because I said so. It's like, if you were drafting a story and you created a closed room, you've just created a closed room, right?
Yeah.
And if you said, no, scratch that doesn't work, while you're still in the writing phases, you would be able to destroy a closed room. Or, let's say, in a mystery novel, when the closed room is inevitably revealed to not be a closed room, in revealing that information, that is destroying the closed room.
All right. So, you mentioned that being Beata's power, and you did go as far to say that was the power of witches. So, my now question is, what role are Lambda and Byrne playing then?
I got no.
You got no fucking clue. Like, do you think they have like a
have-
similar power? Do you think there's something else entirely?
I think that they are on like a higher form of power than Battler and Beatrice, but I as far as any practical explanation outside of just being on Ryukishi's wild ride for who Lambda and Burn are and what they might represent and what's going on with them, I got nothing. I mean like absolutely nothing. I've got no clue at all.
Oh, I was saying rather than like purpose for what they're doing, why they're here. Do you have any thoughts about them as characters then?
As like characters in
Yeah.
the narrative of like what their purpose is for the story,
yeah.
I think that they are meant to be like your larger scale antagonists.
Okay.
I think it's meant to be like you have Battler and he's your protagonist, and then you have Beatrice and she's your antagonist, but then they grow closer through the course of the questions arc, and it's revealed that actually they're on pretty equal footing, and the real big bad is Lambda and Burn.
All right.
But I also am worried that that's exactly what Ryukishi wants me to think. And obviously, I'm not vigilant enough about that, so who knows?
Who knows what Rikishi wants you to think and doesn't want you to think?
Jelly, I want you to know that, unfortunately speaking, by recording this podcast with us, we are just going to keep crystallizing all of the theories that you're throwing out. So when I invite you back on and when you finish EPA, I'll be able to play all the sound bites to you.
I'm looking forward to it, honestly.
It'll be delightful.
I've always wanted my own clip show.
Oh, it would be great. Don't worry. It will come with fireworks and all.
I'll prepare a whipped cream pie to slam my face into at some point.
Wonderful.
Okay. You said you wanted to talk about Chesters.
Yes! The Chiesters.
Yes,
My,
Chesters.
kind of ironic favorite characters in the story.
They're
They are.
delightful.
They're great. I love the Chiesters.
I mean, my sprite's
They
based off
exist
one.
just to cause havoc.
I just think they're
Their
silly.
designs are really fun.
I love their designs.
I have come to love the Chiesters almost in spite of how other people wanted me to react to them.
You're so strong and you're the God's bravest soldier. Go forth and fight your battles.
So I've talked about this before, where my general angle of analysis is viewing this as feminist literature. And I don't know if I mentioned this in episode 1, that means that every single time something kind of weird happens, people will at me and go like, so how does your feminist analysis factor into this, okay? And so you better fucking believe whenever 2 bunny girls popped up on screen and went, yeah, everyone was adding me going like, how do the sexy bunny girls factor into your feminist analysis, Jelly? And let me tell you, really easily. Actually, thank you for asking.
Go, let's hear it.
So, my gut check, shooting from the hip, okay, is Chiester sounds like Winchester, they're Kinzo's guns, they're bunny girls, the most stereotypical depiction of an objectified woman to ever exist, ever. So they are magical weapons who are owned by Kinzo. They are his prized possessions. Bam! Bullseye. And I haven't been disproven yet.
I love your analysis here. Sorry, just like the bam bullseye really got me.
It is the most textbook, the most blatant, the most scream it directly in your face obvious case of objectification. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Of weaponized objectification. In the sense that they are literally weapons of the patriarchy that has ever existed in any piece of media I have ever engaged with.
Uh-huh.
If I'm wrong about that, I will be disappointed. That is that's the one thing on my wish list. That I have one thing on my wish list, and it is to be vindicated about the Chiesters.
Okay.
You can't have your feminism be destroyed by one thing, or else
The
everyone's
only
gonna come at you.
wrinkle... There's one wrinkle in the fact.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
There's one tiny itty-bitty little wrinkle, okay, that's getting in the way, maybe, which is that the Chiesters are very obviously Maria's toy rabbits.
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay.
because she gets a little set of these, like, I don't know if they're ceramic or whatever.
they're
Maria
ceramic.
or Rosa they're these ceramic rabbits, and Rosa gets her this whole set of a bunch of woodland animals, and they're all playing in a parade. And there's 4 rabbits specifically, and whenever Rosa's being a piece of shit, she grabs one of them and she throws it against the wall and shatters it. And wouldn't you know it, there's 410, there's 45, and then in episode 4, Double O gets introduced, and oh no, she's injured. And also there's another one, and I can't remember what number she has, but it's really tragic because she's dead. And oh, wouldn't you know it,
556.
Maria had 3 rabbits left. 556. Thank you. Another rifle caliber, shall I say? Another caliber of bullet, which is lending more to Chester Winchester. You get the whole thing, okay? But they're also very obviously Maria's toy rabbits, because not only does the Chester uniform look like military regalia, it also looks like what someone in a marching band might wear.
That could also be from Sweden? Wait, no. Denmark? Wait, what is the...
Wherever that flag may be. Some sort of archetypical European world.
Every time I think somebody reads Umineko, they look at that and goes, England? And I'm like, I'm going to kill someone.
I always feel like, why are they British?
Why are they British? It's not Swedish. I'm fucking up this joke like live, and I'm gonna cry.
Either way, like, they're very clearly both of those things to me. And one of them, the Winchester part, feels like the less direct of the two. Even though if you ask me, Chester, Winchester, duh, like, that one feels like if you don't see that one, when it's revealed, it's going to be like, oh, fucking obviously. So I really want to be vindicated on that, because if I'm wrong, there's going to be egg on my face. But I will always be able to fall back on, they're obviously Maria's little ceramic toy rabbits. The only problem I have with that is, how can they be both?
How could they be both? How could they be both?
I don't know how they can be both, because I don't know how exactly imbuing objects with magic in order to give them a physical form, or to give them a magical form based on their physical form,
The chanification.
works. Because, I don't know how chanification works. It's not so simple in Umineko. Because if that's the case, I don't know how it's possible that they could be both Maria's toy rabbits, who is lowest on the line of succession from anyone in the world, right? For next in line for the Ushiromiya family head. I don't know how there could be some kind of connection between her toy rabbits and Kinzo's Winchester rifles. Physically speaking. Obviously, like, if we're talking, like, metaphorically, it's showing that there is some connection, like, innate between even the lowest person on the rung of the Ushiromiya family head all the way to the top, that is, like, magic is the tissue, or is the thread that gets all the way through there, right, and connects those two things.
Okay.
But physically, in the mechanics of the game board, I don't know how it's possible for them to
Toss
be
a rabbit in the chamber, fire it.
That would shatter the poor thing.
Then my question is, like, if you think the chanification of Winchesters is what led to this, and also simultaneously the rabbits, what is the rest of the magical furniture about then?
Okay,
like,
so
like the stakes, Sakutaro, like, all of it.
Okay, well, Sakutaro feels like a pretty clear cut, like, that is the doll that Rosa gave to Maria, or the plushie that Rosa gave to Maria, that she claimed she made herself, but we discover at the end, towards the end of episode 4, was actually a mass-produced toy, because there is no cruelty under the sun that Rosa Umineko has not enacted upon her daughter.
I was going to say this, but I probably might cut it out. Oh, I mean by no cruelty that the chat couldn't do to backseat a streamer.
Yeah.
That irritated me.
It was a little annoying.
I'll take that out. But I was to say that I was annoyed is the least of the things that I would describe my emotion at that moment.
Yeah, it's a little annoying. I'm glad I didn't pick up on it like consciously, so that it was still a cool reveal later on when it's actually revealed and you're supposed to know it. But yeah, we know that Sakutaro is this lion plush. that Maria has chanified or kunified. I'm not sure. And then my theory for the Seven Sisters of Purgatory is, I think it's stated that Angie gets the stakes of Purgatory. She gets Mammon's stakes specifically from the Ushiramiya mansion after the crime investigation has concluded. Like, it's turned over to her, right? Because she's a descendant of the family, right? And that worked twofold. One, it confirmed to me that the stakes were not actually involved in the murders. Because if they were actually involved in the murders in some way, then the police would have kept them as possible murder weapons.
What do you mean?
I mean that I don't think the stakes were actually used in the murders at all. I don't think the stakes were present during any of the Twilights or anything like that. I think that is a, like, meta, that's like a later, how can I phrase this? I think that is something which is inserted by the people who are writing the stories about what happened on Rikkenjima. And is taken at face value. But I have to assume that because the stakes were turned over to Angie, they weren't involved in the murders. Which then leads me to believe that she has Maria's diary, which describes these stakes as the Seven Sisters of Purgatory, right? Or she believes they're the Seven Sisters of Purgatory. And Angie, who is this incredibly lonely, incredibly abused person who used to have a brother, who used to have a much larger family, and now no longer has one, sees this one connecting thread to the family she used to have, and sort of wills it into existence as the Seven Sisters of Purgatory, as this entity that she can use as one way of connecting with the family she no longer has. In the same way that she uses Maria's diary to connect with Maria.
I see. Well, now having both of those out, like, the more...
Yeah. Virgilia, Renove, Gap, that category of furniture.
So Virgilia,
or one
Renove,
witch, technically.
Gap.
Virgilia is in furniture.
Yeah. Well, my thinking, and I'll be honest, I don't have very developed theories on how this could be the case, so it's just sort of like circle peg goes in the square hole. Is I feel like Virgilia is Kumasawa, or at least this like game board representation of Kumasawa whenever she is acting as an agent of Beatrice. Renove is, I think, Genji, because his name is Ronoe.
Yeah,
like with
Renoe
a U instead of a V, which I didn't pick up on until it was directly stated by Jessica in episode 4, because he's always listed as Servant Genji in the...
Yeah, you see Renoe only, I think, in the scroll text on EP3?
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that at all, but Renove feels like a pretty easy connection to make. And the only one that I don't know is Gap, and I read a theory by someone, and it sounds so ridiculous that it has to be true.
I want to know.
Please tell me. Tell me now. I want to know.
They said
who's in the Gap dress? Who's in the Gap dress?
Is Nanjo.
Now, why the fuck would that be the case?
Gas.
They said that Gap is Nanjo because Nanjo is the only person on the island who would have like the know-how and the resources to do the things that Gap supposedly does. He would have intimate knowledge of the secret passages in Rikkenjima and all of this other stuff. And also, it's another case of circle peg goes in the square hole because we got one person left who's complicit.
You mean you would deny this?
That's a beautiful edit.
I'm just saying it's possible. I don't necessarily believe it's not the case.
What would this say? What would this say?
What would this say?
Obviously, what does this say about each of these characters you're assigning to these magical beings, these magic sonas, so to speak? But like, I'm especially.
What does it say about like their inner world?
Yeah. What?
I don't know what it says that Nanjo would be this extremely curvaceous the woman who's got her entire side of her dress open. I will say, I didn't like Gap very much until she beat the shit out of George Ushiromiya, and then she became one of my favorite characters. I'm a simple creature like that. So exactly. I didn't pay too close of attention to when she was initially introduced. I do need to re-watch that section. So I don't know a lot about what Gap's entire deal is because I missed her introduction.
Gotcha.
Essentially.
Okay.
What about...
Although I will say...
Go ahead.
I'm just now remembering that whenever they're trying to escape through the iron bars, there's some mention of Nanjo having, like, an extraordinary figure or something.
Yeah.
Or, like, some mention is made to that, and I feel like that line, if it's true that Gap is a representation of Nanjo, just becomes incredibly funny on rereads.
Sorry.
Yeah, because of course he got that big titties and good ass to support
him. My man's got that 9-inch waist.
Oh my god.
I'm so glad that I got to, give you that image. Horrible image.
I've seen the PS3 sprite version of this actually because
yeah. This is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite Umineko meme about Gap.
For those listening to this, and we cannot see the image Mushroom just said, is a text conversation that says, "I'm half naked, guess which half?" And the response is the left half, and then they go, "Yeah."
I have to say though, I've seen the PS3 version of this because there's someone in Jad's, I don't think I've said the icon in this episode, the Joseph Anderson Discord server, who,
for the
every single time a new character is introduced to Umineko, they make a Nanjo edit of the character.
I know this person.
There is one for every stake of purgatory. There is one for every member of the Ushiromiya family. There's one for all the witches. There's one for Sakataro. It doesn't matter.
As it should be.
And that means...
So, of course, there's one with Gap.
Of course.
There's one with Gap.
Yeah.
And of course, my ability to be able to find you this image does not prove your theory any more right or wrong. Just for information.
No, it doesn't, because I have to assume that this is just what people do to Nanjo.
It is what people do to Nanjo. I cannot lie.
I mean, it happened immediately. Episode 1, stream 1 of Umineko, people were making Nanjo edits.
Nanjo is just a very memeable character for some reason.
You either pick
People just
Nanjo
love him.
or you pick Goda. Either of those characters is your, would be your goat for the rest of the story. You cheer whenever they show up on screen. You lose your mind. You clap.
I'm a Goda lover.
And then there's the path that leads to, the dark and stormy gothic mansion that's labeled George Ushiromiya.
George.
Yeah. I hate to say it, but every time I reread Umineko, I like George a little more, and I hate myself every time. It makes me so upset, because I hated George with a burning passion, and now I'm like, he's kind of funny.
No, it's actually really bad, because this podcast is simultaneously just the worst and funniest George propaganda and the George hater arc, because everybody on this podcast has such intense feeling about George, and then every time we read it a little bit again and we're like, but I could say something about George. It's Umineko is truly a fascinating piece of work where Rosa Umineko could exist and people still hate George.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I mean, to be completely unironic here, they're kind of the same character in the sense of they're both really shitty and in really shitty situations entirely because that's what they've been molded to be by their circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
They suck, and what they're doing sucks, and you can never excuse their actions, but you can understand why they're there, because everything in their life has molded them into that person. Mm-hmm. George didn't have a choice but to become exactly like that.
Yeah.
I mean, George did grow up with both Ava and Hideyoshi, but mostly Ava.
Mostly Ava. Hideyoshi's great. Hideyoshi's the goat.
Hideyoshi's great.
Hideyoshi is our...
Mm-hmm. It's very
he's the
unfortunate to
character
me.
that we focused on as like he's the best boy. Every time Hideyoshi shows up, it's like the goat has arrived. That's our boy. Let's fucking go, Hideyoshi. And then one point, Hideyoshi and Nanjo popped up on stream, and I was like, damn, it's like looking at two mountain ranges, just peak after peak.
True. Yeah, it's very
my God.
unfortunate for me that I've started to find George like really fascinating to dig into mentally, and therefore by Stockholm Syndrome logic of spending time psychoanalyzing this character, I have grown to enjoy him. It's so fucked up and twisted.
I'm
But George,
I'm sorry for your loss.
George tangent aside.
I mean, real quick, I do have to mention the fact that I felt genuine distress when reading back like the Umineko stream chat after the Gap and George fight scene that I was there for. Someone was like, "I hate that Jelly makes George sound cool." I was like, "Oh, no."
Whenever I see that scene, I think of one meme that I'll send later and not now. But I think you'll enjoy it, Jelly, because to me this meme is exactly what that scene is, and it makes it 1,000 times less cool. But
Heartbreaking. The worst character in Umineko gets a cool scene.
it is. It truly is. But again, George tangent aside, we've talked about what this might possibly potentially mean for Nanjo, but Virgilia and Kumasawa and Renove and Genji, I'm curious what you think this says about them. Like, what does this mean to you if they are who do you think they are?
I don't necessarily know, to be honest with you. I mean, obviously it implies that they are, like, at least for Renove and Nanjo, demonic in nature, since they're represented by, like, actual demons, in the case of Renove and Gap, right?
Yeah.
And in Kumasawa's case, it gets even more concerning because Virgilia was once Beatrice.
Yes.
Right? She was the Beatrice before Beato.
Yeah, she had that title.
Which means, like, that carries with it all of the implications of what it would mean to be Beatrice, and also for her to be a female servant of the Ushiromiya family, who was once Beatrice. It makes me wonder if there are more than just my hypothetical two Beatrices that Kinzo has groomed, and perhaps Kumasawa was physically Beatrice at some point for Kinzo, and then either aged out of it or was seen as unfit for the role and became a servant on some level. But I Kumasawa is a big question mark to me as far as her physical circumstances.
Okay.
Okay, and Genji.
Genji, I can't really get a beat on. He seems to be someone who is just, like, endlessly loyal to the Ushiromiya family, because he is so far into his life and has lived this life for so long that he does not have anything else that he could possibly do. He is like resigned compliance to the status quo, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
It is never an enthusiast. Like, Renove never seems to me to be enthusiastic about carrying out the will of the Ushiromiya family, or...
You mean Renove?
Or Renove,
you
Renove,
mean
sorry.
Genji?
I do mean Renove in this
Okay.
case. Renove never seems to
Okay.
be too enthusiastic about serving the Ushiromiya family in episode 4. It seems to be something that he has resigned himself to do. It is a duty that he must follow through with, right? And I get that same sort of sense from Genji in the more physical world of he seems to be someone who is committed to the Ushiromiya family purely through circumstance. Like, he does not have anything else left in this world other than his duty to the family. He has lived an entire life where he has been treated and regarded as furniture and is fully absorbed into that ideology.
I see. And so, like, I guess one of my questions is how far do you think, like, this, like, I don't even know, like, what word to describe it. I guess like this, like, magic Sona concept in which, like, one magic character seems to have some connection to a non-magic character there. like how far do you think that connection goes? Because like in terms of like personality, they can be fairly different. Like Genji and Renove, it's like night and day. So I'm curious, like how deep do you think that connection goes, or is it like surface level? Is there deeper? Does it say anything deeper about the characters? I'm curious what your thoughts on
I
that
think
are.
it does say something deeper about the characters. Yes, I think that like if I am correct in assuming that these are an alternate persona. My assumption is that when Genji is Renove, or rather, let me rephrase it. Let me start from the top. I think that when the murders are taking place, whenever the plan is being set into motion, and Shannon, Canon, Beatrice, Sayo is working to put things into motion, I think that the servants of the Ushiromiya family, that is to say, Kumasawa, Genji, maybe even Goda, and Nanjo, are all complicit in this plan. I think they are all part of that plan. And when they are acting on that plan and helping Sayo with it, I think that is when they appear to us as their magical forms.
Okay, so
Does that
you
make
believe
sense?
they're accomplices in this case?
Yes. I believe they are all accomplices. I think Nanjo has to be an accomplice to what is going on. For it feels almost too convenient. But I have no real way of denying it without destroying the foundation of a lot of my theories, if that makes sense. It's another case of picking and choosing what I choose to believe is true. And while the doctor being in on it is a very common
Yeah, I
trope,
mean, the
it's
doctor being
never...
in on it, the butler did
Yeah,
it. These are all
Yeah.
very,
very
very
common
common
tropes.
tropes.
The thing that's striking me about that, though, is that has been engaged with. Like, that was directly addressed in episode 2 of, like, how are you going to say Nanjo is complicit here? Like, examine the bodies yourself. But it's never directly challenged, like, it's never directly said, like, he did lie. It's never said that he did fake confirm that those were deaths. It's only presented that, like, these are deaths that you could confirm. It's never directly refuted that that's a possibility.
I I guess my question then is, if they are accomplices, why? What is their motive?
I think with Nanjo and Genji specifically, maybe even Kumasawa, maybe they only really had loyalty to Kinzo.
No, Kumasawa's quit several times.
Yeah, Kumasawa has quit several times. So again, she's a big question mark. I can't figure her out. But like Genji and Nanjo specifically strike me as like loyal to Kinzo specifically, not to the Ushiromiya family. Right?
Yeah,
And so if maybe Sayo could leverage the fact that Kinzo is dead against and maybe blame it on the Ushiromiya family and get them roped into it in some way, as if to make them complicit in the murders, that could make sense, I think. I just don't know how Kumasawa gets involved or why. My guess could be if Kumasawa was previously a Beatrice, then she would understand what Sayo has been through, and maybe that's why she rejoins the staff now that Kinzo is dead, in order to help her enact this revenge against the Ushiromiya family.
I see.
I have a question about you thinking that Kumasawa is a Beatrice.
Yes.
When you say Kumasawa was a Beatrice, what do you mean by what extent of it is?
How can I phrase it? Because we've drawn a distinction between Beatrice as this personal victim of Kinzo's abuse, right? And
Yes.
Beatrice as this Christian allegory for, like, Christ, essentially, right?
Yes.
In episode 1. So in this case, how can I draw that distinction? Because I'm talking about the former rather than the latter. I'm talking about a Beatrice in the sense of an abuse victim of Kinzo's. Someone who was groomed to be Beatrice, his mistress, after his first mistress was gone. Or something along those lines. If the first Beatrice didn't kill herself, but sort of dissociated in a way that made Kinzo abandon her and look for her to reborn, it could be the case that that first Beatrice was Kumasawa.
I mean, Kumasawa seems to have she quit many times, as we have said. She also seemed to have a pretty robust family outside. She has, like, a son who, loves her and, and grew up to be a fairly happy person. Not to say that, like, victims couldn't grow up to become more healthy people, but Kumasawa, like, from the presentation of Kumasawa, like, where do you think besides the fact that, she did once have the Beatrice name, like, where else do you think you would draw your, like, thought processes that she could have been a former Beatrice in the sense to Kinzo?
I don't know. Again, this to me, and this is like self-criticism, this feels like me cutting a puzzle piece to make it fit.
Interesting.
And I'm not sure if I'm exactly incorrect, but it feels rigid. It feels too forced. It feels like I'm doing that because it makes sense right now, not because I actually believe it to be the case. It's like scattershot.
Okay.
If I could give a more textually appropriate answer, this is my blue truth.
All right.
Okay.
I think we've just about covered, like, the greater extent of all of my thoughts on the questions, or to be completely honest with you. If there's something I've missed, it's just gone. It's off into the ether. Like, we've covered in depth my reasonings and my extrapolations based on my understanding of this as feminist literature. We've covered a lot of my theories on the physical identities of some of the characters. We've covered, even some Christian allegory and how that relates to my understanding of those characters. We walked through my experience with episodes 1 through 4 and sort of how my thoughts developed throughout the text. We've gone over what I think the answers arc will include. I think we've just about covered every base.
I think I have two little small questions, which will be very, very brief. One, if you have a favorite character, and two, what is, like, your favorite scene thus far in Umineko?
Okay, so favorite scene is probably the end of episode 4.
It's a very good one.
Recency bias abound,
of course.
Solid pick.
But I'm someone who's very strongly influenced by my emotions.
Understandable.
And I'm someone who is very moved specifically by other characters displaying empathy for each other. And so episode 4 ending with what I perceive as Battler displaying an overwhelming, almost personally hazardous degree of empathy towards Beatrice. Like, at all costs, he wants to understand and humanize her. That really, really speaks to me on a personal level. There's every possibility I am projecting extremely hard onto him. I'm willing to accept that possibility. In fact, I consider it to be likely to some degree. Mm-hmm. But I see a lot in that scene that speaks to me. And so it would be very hard for me to choose anything else as my favorite scene. And now if you want the joke answer, it's the one where Battler almost gropes Shannon, because I get to pull a lot of textual analysis from it. And I just keep getting to bring it up. And just, I look so smart every time I look at the boob grope scene, and I go, actually, that's really important to the text.
I think you're based for that.
Mm-hmm. So who's your favorite character, then?
Okay. I don't know. Because Battler's great. Battler is maybe my favorite protagonist, in a long time.
Yeah.
Battler's absolutely fantastic. I don't think... How can I phrase this? My catchphrase, once again. I like protagonists, okay? Don't get me wrong. I'm fine rooting for the main character. I don't think I have ever had a main character that I love to the degree that I love Battler. Every time he is on screen, I am excited about it.
Yeah.
And I don't think I can say that for any other main character that occupies a role similar to him in any capacity. I am always happy to see Battler Ushiromiya. He is always fun. He's always an incredible character. He has unbelievable stage presence. And the exact same thing can be said of Beatrice.
Yeah.
They are perfect foils to one another. And I am so happy every single time they are on screen independently, but when they are together, it is impossible to look away.
Yeah.
They steal the show every single scene they are in, and it is no surprise then that they are the two main characters of the text. It is very surprising to me that I enjoy the main characters this much. Usually you enjoy the main characters because they're the main characters. They get the most screen time. I don't even think that's necessarily true of these two. I don't know that they do have the most screen time. But I'm always happy to see them, which is surprisingly uncommon for main characters.
Yeah, like typically, like, with a main character, you expect to see them. So, like, when you see them, it's not like, oh my god, he's finally here. It's like, there you are. Like, let's keep on trucking along, you know? Like, this is, you expect to see them at almost every turn. And hardly deviate from them. But with Umineko,
and you kind of like you expect to root for them because they're the main character, and you're supposed to root for the main character.
Yeah, like,
but like you root for Battler and Beatrice because like they're actually going through it. Like they're actually having some genuine intellectual back and forth, and it's fun to see them interact with each other.
I just love the way they bounce off each other, and like the whole like using this format of debate is so engaging. Like the back and forth with like the red truth and now the blue truth that got introduced in episode 4. Like I think it might be like one of my favorite combat system of all time to just like sum it down. Like it's not combat, but it is combat.
Yeah. It's also flirting, which we've established previously.
Yeah.
The Battler and Beatrice need to kiss immediately, sloppy style, as soon as possible.
Of course.
Even though, actually, I don't know if I want that to happen, because that's part of the tragedy of it all, perhaps.
That they never get to kiss sloppy style. That's your tragedy.
Yeah. Yeah, the real tragedy of Umineko is that they don't get to make out.
Yeah.
I suppose you'll see you're right.
Yeah. And then my third answer, which is just in a completely different fucking direction, but for the same reasons, is the Chiesters.
Based.
Every single time the Chiesters are on screen, it's peak.
It's peak.
It's so good. It's so much fun. It's just immediate, like, rumpus roughhouse bullshit.
It's joy.
Every single time they're on screen. It's great. They go, yeah, and then someone gets shot, usually George, and it's a great time for everyone.
It truly
and then we all clap.
We all clap. I can't think of a bad scene the Chiesters are in, like, that isn't at least, like, funny or, like, kind of, like, potent plot-wise, you know? Like,
I can't get upset when I'm at the party and the clown walks in.
No, like, that's my entertainment.
The clowns are here.
That's exactly what I'm here for.
Well, I think that truly wraps it up. Jelly, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me. This is a sincere honor of mine, and I am genuinely thankful that anyone would be willing to indulge this level of delusional yapping.
Listen, I would indulge more if I could.
If time permitting.
Like time permitting. Like, after this podcast episode ends, if you want to keep yapping with me, I will yap with you.
Jelly, and thank you so much for coming in the first place. If we play our cards right, I could get you back for a third episode just so you can talk about Homestuck and the connection to Umineko. We'll have to see if that's going to work out. And then somebody on this podcast will be forced to draw Homestuck style sprites for everybody. We'll see when that happens.
Not to worry. Not to worry.
Oh?
You may know this from the Homestuck VOD, the Homestuck read-along that I did with Joe. If indeed we need Homestuck models, I can bring my own.
Wonderful.
Already ready. I see.
That would be delightful. Oh, that's wonderful.
You see, I maybe is this the perfect time for maybe some blatant self-promo shilling.
Go for
I
it.
stream on Twitch, Jelly Channel TTV.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I didn't even say that.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Listen, I'm not here for the clout. I'm here for the love of the game.
It's not like you
All
get
right?
much clout here, but you might.
That is true. That is true. If anything, we are stealing clout from you right now.
But yeah, I stream on Twitch, and I have a little PNG tuber model. And my quote unquote gimmick is that I will make new outfits for my PNG tuber every time that I play a new game. If I'm going to be on a game for a while, I'll make an outfit that matches the game. And so a while ago, I streamed Hive Swap.
Oh hell yeah!
And so I made a little Homestuck model of my guy. So whenever I played Hive Swap, I would have one that was perfectly themed for it. If you want to watch those streams specifically, and even the art stream where I make the model for Hive Swap, I do have an extensive catalog of VODs available. So I have all of my VODs.
We'll link all of that as well in all the descriptions. Please go follow Jelly. I am truly...
They've all got custom thumbnails. They're all titled after the stream. They're all in bespoke playlists that organize them from first stream to last.
Incredible.
I even keep all of the go live notifications, which I write a unique one for every single stream, in the stream description, and every VOD has a 1-sentence summary of the stream.
The dedication here.
In the description.
That is the dedication I have to preparing my D&D campaigns.
They follow the same format, so much so that I have played with the format. I've had enough time to establish and subvert the format.
Incredible.
In my VOD descriptions.
This is wonderful.
Of which only I read.
I will read them.
I understand.
It's just for me. Sometimes you do a bit just for yourself.
That is so understandable.
That's so real to my heart.
Jelly, you are a absolute legend. You can only go down in history for more people to remember. You will be for sure welcome back onto the stream where I will collect all your sound bites that you get to hear on this podcast episode, and maybe I'll also do Jad streams as well, and you will surely have the most emotional reunion with your old self in a
more than anything. I cannot wait to be vindicated regarding the Chiesters.
Of course.
That is the one item on my wish list, and baby, Santa, honey, I've been a good boy this year.
I suppose you'll just have to see in the scatter arcs when you eventually get there. One day.
Of course. So everybody say goodbye and wave at the camera, and I guess sea cats do crime.
Yep, goodbye.
Have a good one, folks. See ya.